It's going to be one heck of a Figure Friday. So if you saw on Discord last night, I moved a ton of stuff to get to shelves, open up shelves, and took out a ton of toys. So it's going to be a Macross and Robotech toy parade this morning. I'm going to show off lots of things, lots of old toys, some slightly more recent, nothing really brand new, but it should be fun. Some stuff that, a lot of stuff that again I couldn't really fit on the top-down camera, and this way we can take a look at a lot of things. So hopefully everybody had a good week. Looking forward to the weekend. And remember, if you haven't, I can't imagine anybody is here who is not on the Discord. You've heard us talking about it a million times. On the Discord, there is a RPG channel. Yes, right. And as Rabbit Wombat said, Warhammer Fest continuing. So there's going to be new stuff announced while I'm streaming. We're not going to tune into the stream, but once it's done and the article goes up, we'll bring that up and look at it. Yeah, it's awesome. I was just going to say, yeah, so we have the RPG room. We're doing some D&D one-shots that may turn into actual campaigns. Some people played a game last night. It sounded like it went well. There's another one going on tonight. And if you join the Discord, the RPG room, you could even play role-playing games with people like me. No, I'm kidding. We have a ton of great people who are on there playing, so it should be awesome. We talked about on a previous stream, but this is the Grimlock Transformer, one of my favorite ones. He turns into a Mustang, and again, this is widely considered one of the most difficult Transformers to convert. This line, it was Binaltech in Japan and then alternators here in the US, and when they are fully transformed, the cars are essentially seamless. So you can imagine all of these parts have to fit in. The neck is the worst part of it, but yeah, looks super cool. I know they're all actual cars in this line. Not even the Dinobots are not dinosaurs, but I love this. And I had a Mustang. It wasn't this model. It was the one that came after. So this was very near and dear to me. I will absolutely never transform this toy as long as I live. Perpetual robot mode for this one. Okay. All right. Now I literally have. I'll take a picture afterward. But I am surrounded by toys. I have so many things to show off today and talk about. So let's dive right in. We're doing Robotech. We're doing Macross, and it's all started. Well, we'll start here. I don't know where to start. Tiny Chris, like I said, this time I specifically took out a bunch of stuff from the cabinet, and it's, like I said, it's just all arrayed all around me. So you know and love it. This particular toy right here is Transformers, right? So this is Jetfire. It's got the Autobot symbol right there on the crotch. You can't miss it. Now this, of course, is based on the 1/55th scale. I'll try to mention scales when I know it. Most of the toys are scale specific, but not all of them. So this is the 1/55th scale. Now this mold originally for this toy is from Takatoku, and Bandai had this mold. Hasbro licensed the mold to make this toy, but it's essentially the same thing. And this mold has been used a million times over the years. It is an incredibly solid, durable toy. It transforms fantastically well. It looks great. I mean, this is like one of the all-time best toys out there. A lot of die-cast metal components. It's got spring-loaded die-cast landing gear that still works great after all these years, as long as I put it back in the right order. So yeah, just a super fantastic toy that's been, and again, Bandai especially has reused this mold over the years again and again and again. There's so many reissues of this toy that you can get for everybody. It's fantastic. Now, because it is so solid, because it is so solid, there are aspects of this that are not quite animation accurate, but that's always the trade-off, right, with toys. So the main issue with the toy is, especially here in and around the hips. So you can see there are these big metal bars that go up the sides right here. And yeah, so those are the swing bars that let the legs transform from one mode to another, and they're not accurate. And the legs can't swing out because of those heavy metal bars inside. So that's one of the things we'll see when we look at some of the other toys, how the other companies handled that in later versions. But again, as far as like durability and construction and intuitive transformation, I mean, I literally could transform this with my eyes closed, but I've had this toy for 35 years. But most people, I think, even trying to play with this could probably figure out most of it. It's straightforward. It's great. Now, it's so great that some other people, Bandai, you got a tip for that. Other companies have made bootlegs of it. So I have several of these. If you look closely, you can definitely tell it's not quite as high quality. Parts don't fit flush. These wings don't sit closed. But to have some extra mechs in the back of my shelf, you know, it's good enough.
Do it now!
Hey, look, the sound alerts do work. I forgot I had those. Yeah. So anyway, so I have several. I have several of these knockoff ones. They're bootlegs. They're not quite as good, but if you just put them in the back of the shelf, they look okay. And I also have, like, I've shown before, I do have an original of the Bandai. It's missing an arm. I've had it since I was 6 years old, but it's there. That's what this piece is from. So Jetfire had all red armor. I lost that one piece, but so I scavenged it from the other one I have. It gets complicated when you have toys for this long. So when Robotech was shown in the US in 1985, they partnered, Harmony Gold partnered with Matchbox to make the toys. So these were new toys for an American audience, not toys that were in Japan when Macross was first shown there. And these toys were a couple of different sizes and scales. Probably the most famous is this one. Obviously, especially compared to what we just looked at, super big and chunky because you can put an action figure in it. This does not transform. It has some rudimentary things. The wings will open. The canopy can fold up. These are supposed to stay in place. They never did. There were missiles that you could attach to... Yeah, it's definitely thick. There are missiles that you could attach to the wings. It has closing landing gear and then a rotatable head underneath. And yeah, it's fine. It's cute. Hey, Darrow. There were plans to make another one of these with the fast pack armor on it, but that never actually materialized. It even has, what's kind of interesting is that they built in what look like the swing bars from the Bandai toy to make it look even more like toys that you might be familiar with as something that does transform, even though this one obviously does not. Yeah, mine is not in the best condition, but it's okay. So Tiny Chris, the way the transformation works in these Veritechs or Valkyries, depending on what side of the Pacific Ocean you're on, is that the cockpit folds in and up into the chest, So yes, you're not. The pilot isn't crushed. Oh, there's such a great. Who's the cartoonist who did Perry Bible Fellowship? I think it's the name of it. Amazing artist. This is really, really funny cartoons, but did one with essentially Transformers knockoffs, and they're like two Autobots, and one of them says, "Oh, we need to transform," and the other one says, "No, you're passengers," and then there's just all this blood coming out of the robot. It's great. Okay, so that was the big one. Obviously scaled for the action figures. I didn't bring those out. They're up in the shelves, but you know what action figures look like. Then we have bad guys. So again, approximately in the same scale. So we have the Zentraedi Battlepod. And again, you can open it up and put somebody inside. Oh, Pandar, thank you so much. Look at that. Look at how fast Pandar was finding that. So this thing is neat. Now, one thing you're going to see is I have relatively few toys of this design. I was never a huge fan of it. You need a couple of battle pods around. It's a weird design. There have been more battle pods made over the years from other companies, but I don't have a ton of them. Hey, Erdinsk, we are looking at a bunch of toys. So most of these toys came with the decals already applied. That's why they actually have stickers on them. Yeah, so these move. These technically move, although one of them fell off. These are thrusters that move. So they had a lot of moving parts. The legs are spring-loaded, so you could do like a run-in thing, and then they would pop back into place. Ratcheting joints on most of these toys. So again, even after all this time, it'll bear weight. I mean, these were very well constructed toys. Add some tassels. So this is the standard, the basic battle pod. And then for the higher in rank, we have the officer's pod. This one originally had a big cannon on the top of it. It is long since gone. I like this design more than this one, but boy, did it not make for as good a toy. It kind of it slumps over too much. They had to use these much smaller joints here, and they just don't hold the weight as well. As with the other ones, though, an opening canopy so you could put an action figure inside, though, works. It's cold where the battle is. Yeah, not balanced as well. And it's got these cool weapon arms that are quite articulated. So you can get, obviously, kids can get a lot of play value with things like this, but for display it kind of just slumps over. But it's fine. So those are the big ones from the first generation of Robotech, from the Macross version. If Belle Delphine was one of these. So, partly because this is a Japanese property, you get a lot of like standard either military colors or hero colors, but there are some really super flamboyant versions that there have been. So even in the first generation of Robotech, there were you see them in the very first episode. In fact, it's like the Blue Angels. So there's a squadron that's more of like a demonstration kind of thing, and they're outfitted in like bright red, white, and blue lines. And then there have been other ones in Macross sequels that are more really brightly colored. Some of them have like other anime characters on them. Even it's really silly. I'm trying to think if there was specifically a pink, like a standard pink Valkyrie. Probably at some point. Hello, Patty. Welcome. Someone say flamboyant. Yeah, I don't have any of those, at least in the big sizes that I'm looking at today. But they are cool. They made a couple of smaller Mecha 2. So this is for the Zentraedi. So these are the bad guys for most of the first series. But this is just a male power armor. So the way it works is the original Zentraedi, the original alien enemies, they were about 40 feet tall. Their DNA is identical to humans, but they were enlarged with science. So they had those pods, which were really cool, but they also just had actual power armor that they could bounce around in. This is the male version. The female version is very different. In Zentraedi culture, the male and the females soldiers are kept separate, so they don't mix and figure out that they can do fun things other than fight. Now, in addition, there were a line of what are called Destroids. So while the cool people got Veritechs to fly around in, you need grunts. And so the grunts had these kinds of mechs, non-transforming. They're essentially tanks with legs. Yes, Tiny Chris, you are 100%. And there were a bunch of these. You know what? I can never get the names straight with these, but that's partly because they had one set of names in Macross, another set of names in Robotech. All of these have been ported over into Battletech over the years with another set of names that I've heard. So I can never remember which name is which. This is the Tomahawk in at least one of those things. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. It's a Warhammer and Battletech. A lot of different people have gotten a lot of use out of these designs over the years. You'll see when I look at a couple more of them, they all have like the same lower body. So even within the universe, they're sort of they're like mass produced. They're easy to fix and swap out parts. Yeah, and as also so this is the biggest version of this that there was, but there were smaller versions as well. Some of those that were reissued. Okay, so we talk about these toys. The original toys of these were from Matchbox in 1985. Those came out over a few years, then they were gone. Then years later, a lot of these designs would come back under the Exo Squad line. And even with Robotech on the package as like a subset of the Exo Squad toys. It's weird. Exo Squad was a cartoon. They had their own toys, but then they also had Robotech stuff mixed in just for the toys. None of the Robotech stuff made it onto the cartoon, but it was just in the toys. It's all wild and wacky. Opening hatches for more missiles. So these are fun. Okay, so we have this one. We have, again, what is sometimes called the Radar X. So more of a long-range anti-aircraft. It's a me, Bondo! Thank you so much for the resubscription. Yes, lots of missiles on these things. This one, oh yeah, even more missiles come in this one. Again, you can see the same legs, same lower half, so that they're just cranking these things out in the assembly line. A Jaeger mech, okay, cool. Yeah, again, these things have so many different names over the years. One of the cool things that happened in subsequent properties, both, and again, when we talk about how divergent all of these properties and cartoons and everything are. So these were Destroids in the original. These would see further variants in, like I said, in Macross sequels, in Robotech sequels. So they diverge, but they're multiple iterations of the same idea, which is kind of cool. Yes, oh, you gotta... I mean, really, all crotches should come with warning labels. So we have those two. We have, now, if you really want missiles, you need this guy. Because he doesn't even have arms, they're just more missiles. Sometimes called the Spartan. Other things. These actually have little hatches for the missiles, which is nice. And again, same legs. Yes, he has missile stumps. This is not a head. These are just searchlights. Pilots are inside the chest on these. You can see a little bit in this one. Sort of has a view port here. This one, not so much. So many missiles on these things. And then the Gladiator, which has some missiles. These would they don't open up on the toy, but these would open up with missiles. There are some guns here in this one. There you go. There's the gun. But this one was designed to be more of a melee fighter. It could hold a big mace. It could hold the same gun that the Veritechs had, so it had more options as far as its weaponry. Again, the pilots would sit in the chest. This one has this... Some people try to make this into a head, but it's just a little... like a rear blaster turret. Yeah, it's got these kind of goofy hands. They are hands, they just... the toy makes them look a little stumpy. But they're good for, like... you could... because they're a little bit pointed, yeah, you could, like, ram it into the skin of a spaceship or something and peel it back. So these are the 4 basic Destroids. Now there is another one called the Monster or the Mac. Depends on, again, what property you're in. That one is much bigger, and it's just all guns. It has 4 gigantic cannons on the top of it. Its arms are more guns. There have been a couple of toys of that over the years. I don't have any of them. Just never made it into my collection. I actually do think it's a really cool design. I just don't have it. So there. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit anachronistically to continue with the original Matchbox toys, but then, like I said, we'll bounce around some. Try to put these out of the way. Okay, one of the all-time great toy. Another all-time great toy is this bad boy. So this is the SDF-1, the main spaceship, the hero spaceship from Macross and Robotech. Nightbot, I should probably change that. That was from Saturday. So this is the main hero spaceship from Macross. Now this toy is mostly metal. It weighs a ton. Another one of my favorite toys ever. Just a massive amount of play stuff. Everything moves. Everything's articulated. The cannons move. These move up and down. You can pose them. The torso opens up for more missiles. There's a little hangar bay that opens in the back. There's a compartment in here. There's landing gear for when this is transformed to lay flat as a spaceship. Yeah, just tons and tons of stuff. And again, like, these are load-bearing joints that work fine after more than 35 years. Just an amazing toy. Now again, this is a gigantic spaceship. So the head here is the bridge, which is like 5 levels high, and this thing carries thousands and thousands of people. Each one of the arms is a Navy aircraft carrier, like a full-size futuristic aircraft carrier that, through the magic of folding space, gets taken with the SDF-1 when it first leaves the Earth in the beginning of the battle. They attach them to be arms. It's a whole thing. The ship originally wasn't supposed to transform. There's a lot of lore going on. I don't need to get into the whole thing. Yes, and so not only could this thing punch spaceships, but what they figured out, essentially the whole transformation was something they figured out because of power routing issues. It's way more complicated than that, but we'll leave it at that. So part of that, they figured out the ship originally was supposed to be able to generate a force field, and at times they couldn't quite do that, but they could make mini force fields that were essentially force field discs that could travel over the surface of the SDF-1. So there's literally a command center inside where ladies sit at video game stations with a big trackball, like my mouse, and they have a readout of where attacks are coming from, and they're spinning the ball to move these discs around the ship to intercept blasts. But what they figured out was what's called the Daedalus maneuver. So these ships are the Prometheus and the Daedalus. Somebody was a fan of Greek mythology. They figured out if they concentrated all of the force field discs onto the front of the Daedalus, they could punch this into an enemy spaceship, then flip this top open, and inside they packed it full of Destroids, and then they would open it up and all of the Destroids would shoot out all their missiles into the interior of an enemy ship. They'd pull the arm back, the ship would explode. It was really cool. It worked a couple times until the Zentraedi figured out what they were doing and made a trap for them, and then it didn't work as well. So. Again, just an amazing, amazing toy. My parents got this for me when I was little. I've had it ever since. You might see, if you are around the internet, if you're around Robotech toys, you might see these with a little bit more color to them. It did come with decals. Of course, I never applied them. I don't want to apply them. It's fine. There was also a smaller version of this that was about 6 inches tall. So you didn't have to spend the money on a gigantic version. Oh, and even the feet have... The feet can be posed. Just so much cool stuff. Stay. Okay. So that's all of the Matchbox first generation toys. But that wasn't everything. Second generation of Robotech. So now we're into the Southern Cross. Again, based on a completely unrelated anime series, but it did have transforming vehicles. The bad guys were Bioroids, fielded by the Robotech Masters. A race of... Yeah, the robot on his tippy toes, exactly. Basically, another form of humans out in the universe doing weird stuff. So these bad guys were non-transforming. They're just Battleoids. They came in some different colors, different head designs. They have these really cool blasters. They also rode around on little hover jets, kind of like what are the little one person sea craft that you kind of stand up on? Jets, like a jet ski kind of thing, but with flat. Anyway, and there was a toy of that had the actual little hover part of it. So that's the bad guys. Now the main hero vehicles of the Southern Cross. Again, this was one of the things that led me to do this show today and doing it this way, is the Hovertank. That's fine. Yeah, like it's one of those Sea-Doo kind of things. Now this design, it's not the best. So the Southern Cross anime was not, well, it was never nearly as popular, but it wasn't quite as, detailed as Macross was before it. So you have these giant tanks, and these things are huge. Well, obviously the toy is huge. No toy could ever... Chicken head, is it? Okay. Oh, I get, because of the beak. I guess so. I never thought of that. This thing is supposed to have 3 different modes it transforms into. One mode has both of the arms forward over the front of it, so it can have this gun, this little tri-barreled gun, and this gun facing forward. And then there's another and again, that's on legs as it's walking. And then another entirely different mode that has everything folded up. And then this becomes the front of it, and it's like a hover transport. It is completely impossible to make a toy of this that functions in any way because the design just doesn't work. It's just not possible to make this thing in 3D. This was all hand-drawn animation. They could cheat at every step. And there you go. Yeah, it just doesn't work. So this toy technically could transform into the tank mode. So the main body could kind of flop down. The arms could face forward. It doesn't look great. It also leaves... There is a cockpit on this one. You can see it... Well, you can see there's a chair inside that ends up being on the top. But even in the actual design, the cockpit is exposed when it's in tank mode between these two big arms. It's not a great design. It's not a great toy either. It's a super imposing, heavy, massive toy. And I love it for nostalgia purposes. But it's not great. These are also very rare, especially these days. To get a really good version of this toy will cost you a lot of money. I should probably clean this one up a little bit. There's some rust on the metal bar up here. But yeah, so this is a hover tank. As I showed the other day when I was looking at the little 3D prints from various places, there were some other really cool designs in this series from other branches of the Southern Cross military that have never been made into toys. The Logan Veritech, a jet transforming jet that only has 2 modes, the Ajax helicopter that can fight in space, and no toys of these things. Maybe one day. There are other companies now that are interested in doing Robotech toys, so maybe one of them will pick it up. They'll have to make up how these things work, though, because again, not quite as straightforward how these things would work and transform in 3D. Then, let's see, what's next? I did also show off last time, when we get into the 3rd generation of Robotech, Matchbox made the 2 Invid toys, little and big. They're super clunky. They do have some articulation, though. They're not bad. There you go. Matchbox did not make alphas and betas. They didn't have the money, and it didn't seem like it was going to be as popular. Which makes sense. A Japanese company, on the other hand, did, which we talked about. Whoa, don't drop. So a company called Gakken made transforming alphas that look like this. So again, this is from a series that called Mospita in Japan that has nothing to do with the series that created this design, but it is a transforming piloted jet that turns into a robot. So yes, this one is it is very thick and squat. The actual design isn't quite this chunky, but the alpha is it's definitely more of a chunky design than a VF1 Valkyrie. This toy is decent. It suffers from being a design that looks cool in hand-drawn animation, but doesn't really work super well in 3D. I mean, look at those feet. You can just tell that's gonna be chunky and clunky when it transforms into something. Now, what does this transform into? Again, I'm not going to transform the toy. That one does not transform very well, and it is very old. We're jumping around in time a little bit, but the Alpha Jet looks like this. So you can see where the big clunky feet go into the back. This is a Toynami / Aoshima toy, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's the jet mode for an alpha. Gakken made an alpha in this size, as well as a couple of smaller versions. And then there was the Holy Grail toy that I talked about. The corresponding, the beta, or if you're in Japan, this is a Legios, and the beta was the Tread. There were only a couple hundred of them released in France, of all places. And you can, good luck getting it for under 4 digits. I've only ever seen one in person. If you ever find one, let me know. Okay, so that is the original Gakken Alpha, or again, Legios. So then we move on to, let's see what else is. I'm trying to see what. Oh, and then of course, so these are all big toys and transforming toys. There are a million other toys in smaller scale. I have a lot of them. I'm not going to talk about those today. But there were also non-transforming versions of a lot of these things. So essentially action figures. This was a line by, I believe it was Aime. And they're made to look a little bit more like the cartoon. They're less worried about how this would actually transform. The proportions are a little bit sillier. I mean, look at those big old pudgy hands. And again, you can tell that the proportions are a little weird. This one specifically is from Do You Remember Love? The OVA, the movie. You can tell because it has a big cannon on this shoulder instead of just a booster. But these are fun. There's a whole line of these. These also are incredibly hard to track down these days. I have 3 of them. I think there were 8 in total. One of the other ones I have is this one, which is so Guardian or Gerwalk mode if you're in Japan. Again, this thing could not transform. The proportions are all wrong in this little silly one. Yeah, so these were from Japan. But they're cute. And again, smaller, cheaper originally. So if you didn't want to buy a big transforming one, you could just get these. They had them in Guardian and Robot modes. They didn't make any jets in this line, at least. Where do I put these? Hold on. I'm so surrounded by toys right now. I can't even find a place to put things down. All right. The original VF Veritech design, Valkyrie design, again, depending on which part of the world you're from, this thing would be popular forever. They continue to make toys of this thing. There was a lull in toy production for a while. Bandai was still making some reissues of this, but there wasn't a lot of stuff happening. And then a company called Yamato came on the scene in Japan. And Yamato blew up the Macross and mainly the Macross world. First with their 1/60th scale Valkyries. Now, this was one of the very first ones, and you'll see they would revise and refine it over the years. The pros, they look beautiful. I mean, these toys, they're sleek. They are on model in a lot of ways. Super detailed. This thing is heavy. It's almost as heavy as the much larger Bandai version. Problems. It's a little thin, and it's a little flimsy. Now, this toy got a lot of heat when it first came out because it is what we call a parts former. Now, what is a parts former? A parts former is a transformer that you have to pull parts off of it from one mode and then put them back on in another mode. Now, that's a big no-no in the field of transforming toys, because it's breaking the illusion that this is supposed to be something in the cartoon that transforms from one thing into another. Things don't pop off. This isn't crappy Transformers where Optimus Prime's trailer just magically disappears and reappears. It's not supposed to do stuff like that. But at the time, Yamato couldn't figure out a way to make a thin, sleek, cool-looking Valkyrie without having to take parts off. No Arsenal Roy, although the company has done that line before. So essentially, yeah, as you can tell, the legs pop off, transform it, they pop back on. Is it a huge deal? No. At the end of the day, no. As long as it looks cool and it works. Although, again, the fact that it's this flimsy is not great. Later versions, they would fix this and make it a lot more sturdy. I think they even figured out a way to make the legs integrated so you didn't have to take them off. But this is a classic first version, and I still love it. This is also a Do You Remember Love edition. Is it? Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, it's cool. There's a bunch. Yamato is a name that shows up in a lot of Japanese properties over the years. Okay, so this is a basic. Again, this is 1/60th scale. So when we're talking about scales, if you're not familiar with scales, the higher the number after the 1, the smaller it is. So if you had a full-size Valkyrie, it would be 1-to-1. So 1/2 would be half the size. So this is 1/60th the size of a full-size Valkyrie. This is 1/55th the size. Now again, scales and sizes are vague and approximate, especially when the designs are so different as far as like the proportions and things. So we don't get too hung up on that. It's just approximate, and it's mostly just toy speak. Like, oh, this is a 1/55th scale toy. This is a 1/60th scale. Yamato would make 1,000,000 of these. So every single version of the jets that appeared in the show, there's a version. There are battle damaged versions. There are versions, like I said, from Do You Remember Love. They made up their own versions. There are stealth versions. There are low visibility versions. There are camouflage versions. This line blew up. Again, around the world, people love these toys. I have a handful of these. I don't have a ton of them. They were also not cheap, as you can imagine. My favorite. So if you see a Veritech or a Valkyrie that's in blue, chances are good that it's either piloted by or it is some way connected to the character of Max Sterling, or that's the American version, or Maximilian Genius in the Japanese. Super cool character. Possibly why I liked the name Maximilian for my son. Possibly. If you read a certain book on names, you might get a hint about that. But my favorite of the Yamato 1/60th was this one. So Max's VF-1J, loaded with all the missiles and the fast packs. So this is the Super VF-1J, and yeah, this one I was like, I gotta have this one. The only problem is it has a loose front landing gear, so when I'm moving it on the shelf, it'll fall down and it like inevitably will crash forward just enough to knock down whatever's in front of it. I could fix that. I just have never gotten around to it. And this is fully transformable, has all the bells and whistles, but I love this so much in this mode that I don't think I will ever transform it. Looks great. It even has a little tiny pilot toy inside. It's so good. Rabbit Wombat, this one is mine. Yeah, Tiny Chris, exactly. Just get little yellow hazard things to put on there. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites is this one. So Yamato made a bunch of these. Again, for years this line went on. They don't make them anymore. And at some point, Yamato was like, we sell so many of these. They're so well loved. What else could we do? What else could we do with this line? we fixed the issues with the hips after this first version. How could we pack even more detail, more functionality into this design? Well, you know how they did it, of course. Make them bigger. So this is the 1/48th scale Yamato. Let me put this down and I'll show it off. These are widely considered the best, most accurate Robotech Macross toys of all time. And not everybody considers that. But these are fantastic. They look great. They have a ridiculous amount of bells and whistles. There are flaps on the wings. There are all these little vents, covers that you move and take on and off. There's a heat shield. A lot of the toys will have this, but there's a heat shield that covers where the canopy would be when it's in this mode. There's an air brake. I mean, just so much stuff on here moves and can be altered and changed. Articulated fingers on the hands. Just a lot going on. Very, very cool. Very expensive. And as always, in full disclosure, actually not too many of these, but some of these toys I got as review samples with Figures.com. But I always do like to mention that I didn't necessarily buy all of these things. Swiveling like armor joints over some of the articulation. Really, really, really cool toys. So I was very happy to get. This is the only one I have in this scale. It's huge. It has to go down at the bottom shelf where I have like the SDF-1 toy because it won't fit anywhere else. But yeah, very cool. Put that over there. Those are, again, Japanese toys from Yamato. Seeing the success of Yamato, we're going to talk about Toynami. Toynami is a US-based toy company. They've had the license for Robotech for many, many years. At times, Toynami has made some cool stuff. At times, their stuff has been not so impressive. But they got into the game with their own line of Veritechs that resemble the Yamatos. They're okay. Let's put it that way. They have much less die-cast metal, so they're a lot lighter. They feel a little flimsier overall, although they don't have the wobbly joints like we saw on the Yamatos. They came with stickers that are just junk. These stickers were applied by the factory. They're peeling off. They don't look super good. You can see that it has this transforms a lot like the original Bandai, so it has the metal swing bars, which again don't look quite as accurate. They added some different points of articulation to this, so getting away from this version a little bit, which some people liked and some people were very upset about. But they did some cool stuff. They added an LED in the head unit, so you could light up the head. It does have a pretty detailed pilot figure inside. So these were okay. One thing they did with this that was really great is the packaging. These came in what looked like big hardcover book tomes, so you could arrange them really nicely on your shelf if you didn't want to open them. When you opened up the front, this was inside in, I think it was in Battleoid mode, in a clear sleeve so you could see it, and then there was artwork and a certificate on the other side. The packaging in these was top notch. Like I said, the toys, they're okay. They had some issues. They made, I think it was the 5 main hero versions. Then they also did fast pack, so you could put on the super armor, and then this would be the so and these were in a lot of stores. This American made is not exactly, but made by an American company. So these were actually widely available. All of the Yamato stuff, if you wanted to buy those here in the U.S., you had to get them from an importer or on eBay, and it was a pain in the butt, especially in the old days of eBay in the late 90s and early thousands. But yeah, they're fine. I have a few of them. For some reason, I ended up with 2 of this one, Rick Hunter's VF1J. So I have one in jet mode, and then the other, like I said, they're a little bit more fragile than I'd like. But so this does make a pretty cool display in Guardian mode with the super packs on it. Technically, this super pack is supposed to go to Miria's Veritech because it's in red, but it matches, so I was like, that's cool. So yeah, that looks pretty good on the shelf with the missiles. Bonk, crash. Stay. Alright. Toynami did fair business with those. And again, that would lead Toynami to continue on with the alphas for the 3rd generation. Also partnering with a company in Japan called Aoshima that had the same design. So they were both companies were working with the same molds, but doing slight differences. I have 2 more of these alphas. I'm not going to take them out because they look mostly the same. There were some color change issues. A couple of details were different if you had the American one versus the Japanese one. This toy is garbage. Hey, Uberbaldi. It's so sad how much potential this toy had and how it failed to live up to the expectations. At first glance, it's fine, but man, you look close, nothing fits flush on this toy. Everything is at a slightly weird angle. It doesn't match up. There are little flimsy pieces that pop off. It's bad. It's just bad. It makes me so sad. Because it's a cool design. I like the alphas, but this thing just doesn't work. It is really crappy landing gear. In robot mode, or Battleoid mode, it's really flimsy. So my 3 are in jet mode. I am never transforming them. It is what it is. Sad. But one way that Toynami Aoshima actually did succeed is they took this. Yeah, I know I should smash it. It does. It does have there's a bunch of little doors that open up with more missiles. But, man, even just that was so creaky. I'm worried that might snap off. So this is the alpha, the little jet. And then they made betas. Not beta males, beta Veritechs. The only beta toy that has ever existed before this one was the one made by Gakken / Lansay, distributed in France. There's only 100 of them in existence. Super rare. So it was a big deal when Toynami / Aoshima was coming out with a beta toy. And it was going to be in scale with the alpha. It could connect. It could do all of the things that we always wanted it to do. And the beta toy is actually pretty darn cool. Now, it looks bizarre, but it's true to the actual animation. It's a weird looking vehicle. This thing is heavy. It's huge. It takes up a lot of space. But it's cool. I'm actually, for all the faults that Toynami has, and some of their products are really not good, this thing is cool. Oh no. As it tries to transform in my hands. The jet mode of this is, again, just a really weird, goofy looking design. It's really only good for if you want to combine it with an alpha, but the alphas are so crappy, you might as well just leave this in Battleoid mode. It has a little tiny head unit here. These up here are just more missiles. you may have noticed that there are lots and lots of missiles in all of these things. But yeah, like I said, I actually do genuinely like this. This one came in 3 different colors: the blue, the red, the green. There was supposed to be a shadow version, but Toynami never fulfilled that promise. There was a Robotech sequel that was made, an animation called Shadow Chronicles. Came out a number of years ago. It was okay. It was a movie. The storyline was fine. The animation was spotty. Some of it was really good, some of it wasn't. Harmony Gold went with some fairly cheap Korean companies to do the animation, so it's not consistent. And it did okay in whatever metrics they had for it, and they were going to do a follow-up, but then that's when they signed the deal for a live-action movie, and then that killed any future animation. At the time, when these things were coming out, Toynami was like, okay, well, let's make toys from these things. So they made a version of this toy based on a slightly different version of this from that animation. So a Shadow Chronicles alpha for one of the main characters, Maya Sterling, another child of Max. That toy was so bad, so much worse than this one, that they actually recalled it. It was so bad. Then they came out with a second version that fixed some of the issues. And again, there was supposed to be a beta that could connect to it, but by that time they were like, we're just throwing money into a hole at this point, and they canceled it. Boo, boo, hoo. Okay, so those are all of the, at least one of, because again, some of these things I have more different versions in the shelf that I didn't pull out, but those are all the things that... Oh, and then actually Toynami did make some Battlepods. They're a little bit more like statues. They don't have all of the articulation. They're cool. They're fine. Again, I was never a big enough fan of the Battleoid design to hunt down a bunch of the collectibles. This one they made in a bunch of different versions. This weird green color scheme, again, is from the Do You Remember Love? Optional missiles on top for some of these things, but this is just the only other one I have after the original Matchbox toy. It's cool. The design, it's not my favorite. Outside of the United States, there have been Macross sequels over the years, again and again and again. Sequels, prequels, Macross Zero, Macross Delta, Macross Frontier, over and over and over again. All of these things. All of them have new and really cool Valkyrie designs. They've been made into toys by Bandai, Yamato, a bunch of other companies. Technically, none of these things are available in the United States, but again, you can import things. So I only have a couple. So this monstrosity is I think this is the YF-23. I don't know. These things have a lot of different names and things. This is another toy that they made multiple versions of this over the years because it was kind of a hard design to pin down. It looks cool in this mode, but if you look on the bottom, it has these giant just panels to try to cover up all of the kibble. So underneath this are the arms and the legs, essentially, and it's pretty unsightly. They managed to make another version of this toy that made this a lot smoother underneath. Doesn't quite look like this. I'm not a fan of how this thing looks in its robot mode, but this looks cool enough on the shelf. This is from Macross Plus. This design would later become so again, if you see YF at the beginning of a fighter craft, it means it's a prototype version. If it becomes a mass-produced version, then it's a VF. So this is the original prototype experimental version. This design would later become the basis for a mass-produced version, so you would get VF versions, but this is the first one, so it's a Y. It had a weird system where the pilot sort of communed with his craft. Rabid Wombat. So essentially the plot of Macross Plus is that they're looking for the next version of the Valkyrie. What's going to take the place of the VF1, and again, depending on your timeline. So it's this versus another one that would become the Thunderbolt, and it's cool. It's a cool animation. Interesting characters. Like most Macross series, also has something to do with music. There's music involved, and then I think the last major Valkyrie toy I have is from Macross Zero, which was a prequel to Macross, which must have taken place in the early 90s, technically, I think. We're now well past where all of these things were supposed to start in their universe's continuity. So this is a crazy toy. It is huge. It came with this really cool flight stand. This was also this was a review sample, so I didn't buy this one. And this toy is amazing. Look at how slim this is. This is a fully transformable Valkyrie that transforms into a robot. And all of those parts fit down into that narrow a frame. It's pretty remarkable toy engineering that I will never have the patience to transform again in my life. It took hours to get this thing to transform between modes, which of course I had to do for the review and to take all the pictures. Very impressive, really cool, very fiddly, but it looks great. I don't remember exactly what the name of this thing is. It's one of the enemy mecha. But yeah, very cool. Very large. You know what? I should take a drink of water. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Macross Zero, so the show that this is from, it also had a really, really cool, essentially what was to be like an earlier version of this craft. I don't actually have any toys of it, but it is really, really cool looking. Okay, what Robotech, what Macross news did we miss while we were having this talk? Let me bring it up so we can see. So we can share, because I want to know. I want to know, what is it? What was the big preview today? Oh, it's orcs. Warhammer. Yeah, I meant Warhammer. Yes. Okay, hold on. Let me bring it up. Lady Guardsman heads. What? Okay, hold on. Yeah, window capture. Yes, I want you actually to work. Are we not going to work? No, we are not going to work. Macross orcs. Okay. I will add a new window capture, sure. Window capture and add source. I don't care what you call it. Just add it. No, not that window. Nope, nope, not that window. That window, yes. A little smaller. I guess it doesn't really matter. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Warhammer Fest, Day 5. Even more Warhammer 40k. Yeah, no, let's check it out. Sure. Blah, blah, blah. They talked about it. Beast Snagas. Oh, that's cool. It's coming in its own big army box. So sort of like what they did with the Sisters of Battle when it first came out. Oh, that's so cool. These guys are rad. So it says, yeah, we've seen the Squig Hog boys. So those are the ones down here at the bottom riding the creatures. And it says, mobs of mounted beast snagas are often led into battle by a knob, much like their foot-slogging comrades. For these brutal warriors, the regular Squig Hog doesn't offer quite enough oomph on the charge. Instead, they ride ferocious smasha squigs. So that's this big one down here in the corner. Cool. Oh, look at that. Ooh, that's a neat model. I love how they are at once they're at once sort of more primitive, but they also have really cool cybernetic limbs. That's great. Speaking of leaders, you may have noticed a particularly conspicuous gentleman with a rather wild crop of hair hanging around. Zodgrod Wartsnaga is one of a rare breed, a runt herd for hire, shunned by Orc society for his wild and preposterous idea. His supposedly absurd theory, maybe grots aren't entirely useless after all. Wow. Look at that claw. Neat. Oh, look at that. It's a little grot on a little tiny squig with a wheel. Cute. Alright, that's just a lot of fun. And then they did an interview. Cool. Ooh. Look at that. Mech. Grot on top to fire the cannon. That's pretty neat. I assume you're going to get the better ballistic skill on this weapon too, because it's fired by the grot. And then we have upgraded Cadian shock troops. Oh, no. No, stay on that. Stay on that. Now, these are Astra Militarum. So these are the human forces of the Imperium of Man. And the models for these, the standard models that you can get right now, are very, very old. They're not terrible models, but they're very, very old. And one issue is that when you read the lore for Warhammer 40k, a limited, well, of course, Rabid Wamba, yeah, limited run for some of these things. Although, yeah, limited run for Games Workshop stuff recently means very limited for some of it. In the lore, the Imperium of Man, the Astra Militarum, there are a bunch of ladies in it, which makes sense. It's just the human meat grinder for humanity. They need troops. They're going to get men. They're going to get women. They're going to get anybody who can fight. But there's a distinct lack of female representation in the models. So here we've got some lady heads. Again, the bodies don't need to be super feminine. They're just wearing these heavy suits with armor over it. But definitely getting some heads in there makes a big difference. Oh, that's cool with the cards. So some nice detail in the actual characters here. Oh, and then here we go with the heads. So boxes of Cadian shock troops will soon be upgraded with a whole new sprue of additional parts. So we've got, yeah, a couple of lady presenting heads. Of course, some of them, they're helmeted, so you can kind of do whatever you want with them. Some new weapon options. That's cool. Oh, a psychic storm is coming. Looks like Grey Knights. Okay. Fun. Yes, Canadians in 40k. Sure. The orcs will be out soon. Yeah. Yeah, they don't typically give release dates for stuff until it gets a lot closer. Cool. Well, I am surprised that we went through an entire Warhammer Fest without getting some sort of new Space Marines. I would have thought that would definitely have happened. But the stuff looks cool. I'm glad that there are new orcs. We don't need more Thousand Suns. Beat it with Thousand Suns. Nobody likes them. I don't like them. I'm not a huge fan. Cool. So I think that's all of my... That's most of my big Robotech toys. Again, like, I have more of some of these things. I have more of these from Toynami in a couple different flavors. It's more of the alphas. So I have other stuff around, but that's a pretty good look at the overall collection of larger toys. In the bootlegs too, I have a Max and a Miria in these bootlegs. They're junky, but again, it's fun to have around just to fill out a shelf. I have promised that we'll do another stream like this at some point where I just bring down some of my larger collectibles in general, not from one series, but just some of the bigger stuff I have. Because again, most of my toys are small scale, so they're easy just to grab out of a shelf. But if I really want to look at statues and larger scale stuff, I would need to do it in a setting like this. Stuff that won't fit under the camera when I have it on the top down. So one of these days, we'll do that. Alright, let's see who is streaming right now, and we can raid. Oh, I should talk about this weekend. Yes. I will be playing Dungeons and Dragons with some of you tonight. Very excited about that. Made up a new character. Playing a cleric, a human, good healing cleric for the first time ever. I'm excited. Usually I play a barbarian of some kind. So that's tonight. Tomorrow we have the Warhammer War Room stream. Unfortunately, the guest I was really looking forward to having had to cancel. Postpone, I should say. Not canceled. We will have this guest again in the future. So not tomorrow, but the following 2 weeks. Very cool guests. In theory. Very cool guests coming up soon. Hyper will be running Warhammer tonight. They announced it a little bit too late for me to get involved. I did not want to cancel on my D&D tonight. Their schedule is very very flexible. Things happen at the last minute, which is fine. Certainly no fault of theirs. But yes, I already had D&D scheduled. So that's tomorrow, and then tomorrow night is Family Feud, Home Buddies style. I am super excited about this. Looking forward to this. Family Feud can be hilarious, especially with the right people. If you haven't, get on the Discord, go in the general room. There's a link to go fill out a form where you can answer the questions that we will be competing over in our Family Feud. Don't talk about the questions. Don't talk about your answers. I can't look at it. I can't know anything in advance, but definitely go and fill those out because we need your responses. Okay, who should we raid? Got a bunch of people on right now. Let's do these people. No, and you can be as silly as you want with those answers. That's fine. Because again, the game is not... We're not trying to think of the right answer to these questions. We're trying to think of the answers that you all would have given. Which is, again, part of why it's so much fun. And again, I know nothing of the questions. And I don't want to. I want to be completely... Why did that not work? Oh, because I spelled it wrong. Yeah, I want to be completely surprised. Attempting raid. Okay, cool. So we are going to raid Frog Lane Studio. which is a super cool British, English, whatever you call it, gentleman who is an amazing hobbyist, an amazing painter and detail and weathering expert. One of the really cool things that he does is he's the guy who takes the McFarlane Warhammer action figures and repaints them and converts them into all sorts of really cool things. So we'll see. I think he's playing a video game and he's talking about stuff. Thanks everybody for hanging out, looking at toys, just having a fun toy day. The only bummer is now I got to put all these things back. But yes, he does lick his brushes a lot. He did a video all about there are all these techniques you can do with your saliva. And I mean, hey, it's a thing. Okay, so go say hi to him, and I will see some of you tonight for Dungeons and Dragons, or I'll hear you, and then I'll be on tomorrow for all the usual stuff. Okay, bye. Raid is happening. Go, go, go.